I always try to get back to that moment of magic where you can turn everything off that's going on, everything that you know, and really appreciate something for the pureness of that entertainment or that amazing thing that's going on.
Richard Cole is one of the most overlooked members of our professional community. The people who do know Richard tend to just know him for what a really kind, funny, and nice person he is. You have to look beyond that, which is a little weird to say, but you need to. People tend to think of him as funny and nice, and he is those things to the point. He's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And I think that overshadows what a deep well of experience he has. 3 decades in the business, a serious commitment, I would say like top 1% level of commitment to being an entertainer, to doing the additional education in what it really takes to be entertaining on top of doing serious education in hypnotism. In this way, he is really, really rare. First of all, how's your life? What do you like about your life right now?
What I like about my life right now is probably my freedom to do what I would like to do through my performing that I have. The shows that I do allows me a steady income. I have my business kind of on autopilot. So I get the shows when I want the shows, and I get to pick and choose the shows that I want to do. And so once you're financially comfortable, I have the opportunity to do other things. And that's the freedom that I like. If I want to go and take a weekend off, I can. I can do that with my wife, and away we go somewhere. If I want to travel, I could do that. If I want to knuckle down and clean out the garage, as my wife has been suggesting I do for some time now, then I can get to that. And yeah, so that's what I like right now. That's what's going on right now that I enjoy.
Cool. You've been in the business for a while. What do you got? 25, 30 years?
I'm in my 28th year, and that's 28 years full time, so it's all I do. I'm not a radio DJ. I'm not into Airbnb rentals. I'm not into flipping real estate.
You're
I
not
don't
diversified? What's
I
wrong with you?
I know it's terrible. It's terrible. I specialize in comedy entertainment and good looks. So that's what I do well. And yeah.
You know, you and I have talked a lot, and I don't think I've ever asked, how'd you get in?
But you know what? It's a great story. I love telling this story. When I was 12 years old, my dad who took me to the college where he worked, the Ontario Police College here in Ontario. And I got to see 2 people who would influence the rest of my life. The opening act was a mentalist, a real mentalist. His name's Backwards Bob. And
Sounds like a real mentalist to me.
mentalism by its very nature, by definition of the word, is using the mind for creative things and giving these demonstrations. And so he would do amazing stuff. Like, he had memorized the GDPs of all the countries in the world. So he would hand out a book, not like National Geographic, but back in the before times, they used to have these books with all countries' national gross domestic profits. And he would say to somebody, okay, turn to page and name a country, any country, and they'd name it. And he'd do the population of that country, gross domestic profit, what their major crops were, the whole thing. It was fascinating. It was fascinating to me. He would write things on the blackboard, and then he would turn it around and he would write words backwards. That's why they called him Backwards Bob. And
Okay.
he could talk. He would say entire sentences and paragraphs. They used to be called reel to reel tapes. and he would record what he said into these reel to tapes, and then he'd play it in reverse, and it would be a whole sentence, a whole paragraph. It was the most fascinating thing I saw, the ability to really use the human brain. That's a true mentalist, not like magic mentalism. That's a different thing.
Wow.
But he was the opening act, so I was fascinated right out of the gate. And being 12 years old, that would be cool and handy in my schoolwork, right? Being able to have all these memorization capabilities. But the headline entertainer, he was a hypnotist named Mike Mandel. And Mike Mandel is well known for blazing many stage hypnosis, comedy hypnosis trails here in Canada. A fantastic, wonderful guy. And so at 12 years old, I saw him do a stage hypnosis show at the college where my dad worked. And I saw that and I said, I want that power. So I started studying magic as a kid. You're learning magic tricks and that sort of stuff. And then I went to high school. I was in musicals. I took some tap, jazz, and ballet. I know you could tell Barishnikov right here. And so I did musical theater and I loved it. And I went to university, Carleton University up in Ottawa, and I finished up at Queen's University in Kingston. And one of the things I was learning was psychology, while also at the same time doing open mic nights at Yuck Yucks, which is a comedy club. And so in my final year of university, my friend Big Kevin, we call him that because he's tall, and him and I, we went to Peterborough Showplace Center in Peterborough because he said, hey, there's a hypnotist and a magician. Do you want to go see them? And I went, yeah, sure. And the hypnotist, all those years later, was Mike Mandel.
Wow.
And it was like, yeah, I think this is God telling me, hey, you should be an entertainer, and this is how you should entertain people. So that's how I got into it.
That's super cool. That's super cool. Based on what you just shared as a story and the decades of perspective that you have, I can't help but focus on this idea of backwards Bob and you saying that's a real mentalist. Doesn't it feel a little bit like entertainment has cheapened to some extent? Like, I love mentalists and I love the magic mentalists that you're talking about, but I also find a sort of admiration that's rare for the entertainers who have really carved something out for themselves. And it sounds like the way you described Backwards Bob, he had done that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, ish. I think what you mean is like when I describe that story, it's like, wow, what an amazing entertainer that had to be, right? And he was an opening act who could use his talents in an entertaining way. I think the same can be said with hypnotists. I'm trying to remember the term. It's allied arts, but it's the type of entertainment that we do, that hypnotists do, where it's
Well, most of the time we're classified as novelty acts.
mhm.
And I've always felt like that was interesting because I didn't quite see where the novelty was when I got into it. I was like, what do you mean? I thought of novelty acts as just different somehow. And then I found myself more and more making the argument that part of why we keep getting away with being mediocre as a profession is the novelty of what we do. That we can really roll in and just put on the same kind of stage hypnosis show that 25 other hypnotists have done, and most of the folks in the audience will be impressed because they haven't seen a show before, and the novelty of it will win them over.
The novelty and the mysticism of hypnosis, I think, is still there. I don't believe that the general public believes in that magicians have supernatural powers anymore. that they may have, hundreds of years ago during the discovery of witchcraft. But I think hypnosis is still enough misunderstood. It's interesting the way I'm just thinking right now. It's enough that it's misunderstood, not entirely not entirely understood, like the general public doesn't exactly know about it. So it's still kind of mystical, strange, and weird. And so I think that the novelty is still there in a I don't know exactly how it's done kind of way. So when a spectator sees hypnosis on stage, I believe there are two or three minds. They're there for the pure comedy. They want to get up there and they want to get hypnotized and be the stars of the show and do some funny stuff or experience it. What is this hypnosis all about? I'm going to experience it. And then there are those people in the audience who want to be entertained and a little bit mystified. When I started out in magic, it was always cool. I would go to these magic clubs, the Ring 151 in Ottawa, and I got to see some really amazing magicians do amazing things, mostly with cards. There was a magician, Gary Wallet, and another friend, Denny, and they would do these amazing things with cards. And I knew card tricks, but just seeing the manipulation that I couldn't fathom. I knew they were doing something, the skill required, and best of all, they were incredibly entertaining just with cards, right? And even though I knew what was going on, I didn't care. I didn't care. I just wanted to be involved. A friend of mine, Chris Pilsworth, he's a fantastic magician. He does amazing things. He puts a cactus inside of a balloon. Cactus inside a balloon, all magical, and the balloon doesn't pop. And so when we've been friends for a long time, Chris and I, so I've seen the evolution of that trick. And when he first performed it in a group full of magicians at a magic conference, he finishes with the cactus inside the balloon in his hand, and the overture of O Fortuna. You know that song? Da, 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 da,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Carmina Burana?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. And he's just like this, and there's a cactus inside a balloon. Da, da, da. And nothing. He's at this conference with a bunch of magicians, no clapping, no laughter, nothing. It's quiet. Now, I'm sure it was probably quiet for only like a couple of seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. And as he turned to set it down, there was like that hesitant clap, like, and he came off, and afterwards I talked to him, and he said, "Oh man, I don't know what happened to the trick." I said, "Dude, you blew their minds. You blew their minds. There was such a time lapse between people seeing what they saw and people who know putting together that, well, cactus and balloon should not go together. How did he do that? I have no idea." And the brain goes into maybe even a PGO spike at that moment, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? They didn't even know that we should applaud until somebody started applauding. Well, one person led the applause, and it might have been me. After an awkward silence, I'm like, do this. That was a magical moment, and I always try. I'll get back to my point in a minute. You know me, tangents. And I always try to get back to that moment of magic where you can turn everything off that's going on, everything that you know, and really appreciate something for the pureness of that entertainment or that amazing thing that's going on. And so I think with magic, when I would go see David Copperfield or any of these magicians live on stage, I actually got the opportunity to be like 3 rows from the stage, and there's nobody in front of me at a David Copperfield show. And the person that took me, they were like, "Are you uh, are you gonna figure this all out?" And I said, "No, no way. I turn it off. Just turn it all off because it's like watching Sting in concert or a band that you really love. Like I'm a musician. I know how to play these instruments. I know the notes. I know the chords, but I turn it off just
Yeah.
to appreciate that moment. And I think that with hypnosis, here we come back. With hypnosis, we're still at that stage where people could know everything they need to know, but they they don't know enough to turn it all on and say, "Oh, this is the induction part. Oh, there's the deepening." And so it's still fun. It's still fun for people to go to a hypnosis show, which means back to what you said is that they don't know the difference, or do they care if there's a difference between hypnotists, right? It's just a hypnosis show where it's going to be funny. There's going to be a mystical part to it. And then there's going to be funny stuff happen. I'm not exactly sure about the mystical part. I really don't care, but I want to see my friend up there fall in love with a giant yellow banana. So that's where I think it's still a novelty, but that novelty allows complacency. Is that the right word I'm looking for?
Yeah, I think that's my big thing that I keep trying to spread as a message to colleagues is like, don't let the novelty become a crutch. It's okay that the novelty is there. That's fine. It is a novelty. But don't just be like, and that's enough for me, so I can just show up and leverage the novelty and that's it. That's the thing I get frustrated by is I feel like there's way too much of that in our business.
Also, I mean, back in the olden days when you were a magician or a comedian or other type of variety artist, you could travel around the country with just one show, and you could take that show on the road because this is before TV, obviously. So you could take that show on the road for years, travel around with it. You didn't have to necessarily be too creative, but now the era that we live in, you have to be creative, and you almost, as a professional, you want to be creative. It's just like it's in our nature. It's in my nature anyway to be creative. I love to come up with new skits, and as an interactive performer, I enjoy utilizing the audience in ways to make the comedy funny and to keep everything going. So creativity is important, but it certainly, I can see there are a number of people in our industry who are just slap a show together and this will be what I will do part time. I will do this one show forever and make a few coins along the way, which, does it hurt the industry? There are those that would say yes. There are those that would say who cares? And I'm one of the ones who believes, like I think it was Tesla, or was it Alexander Graham Bell, who just kept inventing. You just kept you just keep inventing, right? And because we're inventors and we keep going and we keep creating, we survive. We're like sharks, and it doesn't matter what the bottom feeders are eating. It doesn't matter what those on a shark, there's like the fish that are on the belly swimming along with the shark, but the shark's doing all the swimming and they're just riding the coattails kind of thing. Because a shark's a shark, and anytime it wants to turn around, it'll just, eat you. So
Stick that on a bumper sticker. So I want to bridge back to something you said earlier. I love what you're talking about, and so I'm fascinated to hear you connect this for me. What's your version of cactus in a balloon? Like you brought it up because you appreciate it and clearly you get everything conceptually. So how do you apply what you're talking about to the work you actually do?
it's a feeling and it's an emotion, and our job as entertainers is to entertain an audience. And my feeling, I have two. I always want to leave the audience with a better feeling than when they got here, and a feeling that they weren't expecting. Like a moment. My friend Joe Kidd, he calls it a moment of awe and wonder, where the audience leaves just like, wow, that was, I came expecting to laugh, I laughed, but I feel something different. So in my show, I try to make, I try to make 110% is what I call it, 110% entertainment. I know it's logistically impossible to give more than 100%, but so I will do my entertainment. I will entertain everyone. And if I can include something that connects with an audience member or the audience in general, or something that has happened in the performance that goes beyond just the entertainment, then I'll do that. I have in my show skit that I use a roll of toilet paper. And so when I get there, I often ask either the person who hired me or someone, the big president of the company or something. I will say, listen, I have this roll of toilet paper that I'm going to use in a skit. I'm not exactly sure how I could use it. Do you have any ideas? And invariably, if it's a president or depending on how higher up they will go, they'll say something like money. They'll say something like money. And I go, oh, that's a great idea. So then I'll do a skit where the pieces of toilet paper become money. And I will look at the president or whoever suggested this idea. And I'll just give them an affirming, yeah, yeah, you got this. And that way, it's kind of like they're in on it. They're in on it. I was going to do that anyway, but they have a sense that they were a part of the show. And at the end, I'd leave. Everybody says, "Wow, that was a great show." And the president goes to the organizer and says, "You know that skit with the money? That was my idea." So now they're like they just feel a lot better. That's just one small bit that I do. There's other ways in my show that I leave people with some positive feelings. The cactus in the balloon moment where their brain is like blowing and they don't know how to respond. I still search for that. I keep searching for that moment of wonder and awe in my end talk, which is the opposite of the pre-talk. But in the end talk, I I leave them with positive feelings and letting them know that they can change their lives and everything. So hopefully that sort of thing sticks well beyond somebody making out with a giant yellow banana. You know, something like that.
Yeah, you do what you can. That's great. That's great. One of the things that's really interesting about you is that you did start so early with an awareness that entertainment was important to you, and you worked on various forms of that, right? I didn't even start in hypnotism until I was 30, and I didn't do anything before that. I didn't try to do stand up, I didn't try to do magic, I didn't try to do improv, like none of that stuff. You've got this longer span, and I'm curious, as you've learned so much over the decades, are you significantly different now from when you started as a teenager? What do you think the difference is between younger you wanting to be an entertainer and current day you as an entertainer?
So thank you for reminding me. I've been doing this for decades, not a decade or a couple of decades, but decades. Early on, I believe I knew my purpose was to entertain. My sisters will tell you that when they dressed me up and had me do shows for them at, 2, 3, 4 years old on the staircase, on top of the staircase, they'll tell you they did that for entertainment because they knew I was an entertainer. I think one of them was hoping I'd fall down the stairs, but that's just, that's just sisters for you. But I always felt my purpose was to entertain, that and being an astronaut. But that was a young person's dream. And as I learned more about what my purpose was, now that I am where I am, I realize that there's a phrase that I've developed that when I talk to people, I say it's about maturing in your purpose. Maturing in your purpose. You may have heard about maturing in your business, because there are things that you learn when you start a business, 10 years, decades later in a business, you go, wow, why wasn't I doing that when I first started my business? Well, that's because you haven't matured in the business. We really don't know what we don't know until it comes around. I see people go to conferences and go to trainings year after year. I got trained with Jeff Ronning in Las Vegas in the 2000s. I took a couple of his trainings. And one of the things that I noticed was there were some of the same people were there. And some people go to trainings to learn, this is what I want to do. People like myself go to trainings because we give back. Like once you're at your first training, you're like a parachute opening, just taking everything in. You'll figure it out when you hit the ground. And the second time you go, you've kind of got things figured out. You know what you're doing, but you can attend the same training. Jeff used to record videotape. Back in the olden days, we used to use videotape. And so you could purchase those training sessions. And I look back at them now and I'm like, this is 20 years ago. And I'm like, wow, why didn't I hear that the first time? I'm literally in the room. There's video of me in the room, but I didn't hear that. And I didn't hear that because I wasn't ready to hear that yet. And that's maturing in the business. You got to learn, when we start out as entertainers, how do I make people laugh? Or not even that far. If you're a magician, how do I do this card trick? And then it's how do I make people laugh? And then it's how do I make my show better? Hypnotists, what do I use for sound? What do I use for video backdrops? We keep learning more. Sometimes tangent, sometimes it's not what you need to learn right now. Instead of learning about the latest sound systems, maybe you should learn the latest hypnosis techniques. Go back. One thing that I was very hesitant to do was go to a hypnosis conference that was put on for hypnotherapists. I'm not a hypnotherapist. I don't work to help people overcome those things, but I make them laugh. And so my friend Jason Lynette, he said, you have to go to Hypnothoughts. And Hypnothoughts is a conference in Las Vegas put on by Scott Sandland. And I'm like, there's a lot of therapy folks there. I don't. And he's like, no, you have to go because you'll learn. It's your vibe. I'm like, And then Mike Mandel, who is now my friend and mentor, and I do a lot of shows for Mike since he's retired. He kind of handed the baton to me. He said, you got to go to this thing called Hypnothoughts. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And I went and I was amazed. I was just amazed at how much I didn't know, how much the industry had advanced in a short time frame. You should always be eager to learn and move on. And that's what I was not doing. I wasn't maturing in the business. I was closing myself off and saying, no, I got it all. It's fine. I hang out with stage hypnotists and we share skit ideas back and forth. But are we learning any new techniques or what's new in the field of hypnosis? And most importantly, how we can apply that to my show, how to take those nuggets. So that's kind of maturing in the business, which goes back to maturing in your purpose. Your purpose is going to change throughout your entire lifetime. I started out in this wanting to make people laugh and getting people to love me. and getting paid. Then there was a moment where I was getting paid to do this thing. And I was like, oh, my purpose is now to pay off my car and my guitars and my schooling, and now to help my niece and nephew go to school and graduate and have a great wedding and that sort of stuff. And so as I matured into it, my purpose is now to give back and to do coaching and help those people coming up in our industry who were like me, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where they're practicing magic in the basement. And so I still don't know what's next. I don't know what's next. I've listened to a legend, Terry Stokes, a few times, and I'm like, wow, I think that's my future in a few different ways, but I don't know what I don't know yet. I've not matured into my later stages of my purpose, but I know what I know right now. So hopefully that answered your question. If I could go back and tell myself there's not too much I would change, there's not too much I would change. I would just say every stage, enjoy that stage and soak in as much as you can. Because when it comes time to look back on it, you want to remember all the awesome stuff and how many lives you've changed just by making them smile and laugh.
Yeah, that's great. Good for you. What's the difference for you between you play in a band, right? When you're gigging with your band, what's the difference between playing in your band and being solo on stage doing a hypnosis show for you?
So the band that I play in, that I used to play in, we just lost the drummer a few years ago. Not for lost him, but he comes back and plays every once in a while. The band was the Rock Nest Monster. I love it. That's my bass right there. A friend of mine who's auto body guy, Rob White. He saw us playing at one corporate event that we were at, and he said, "Can I paint your guitar?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally, man." It's like an 87 for those guitar nerds. It's an 87 Ibanez. It's nothing to write home about. It's got new pickups though. They're really sharp and tight. I don't know. Anyways, so the what were we talking about? The band. Oh yeah.
Right. What's
So
the
what it's like
difference between when you're performing with your band playing music versus performing on your own on stage as a hypnotist?
So what's really cool is, as entertainers, entertaining is our job. Is what we do, is what we do. Performing for me, when I'm in the band, Steve Lippett, the guitarist, he's like the leader of the band, and we just jam and we have fun. The band doesn't play a lot of gigs, just like personal gigs, friends' houses and that sort of stuff, because I can't. Again, as a professional, you need to be able to devote the time to become proficient at whatever instrument it is you use. As a hypnotist, I do vocal warm-ups and I strengthen my voice. I'm not a singer, but I do use my voice. So my voice is my instrument. So when we're jamming or when we're playing, I take a back seat. I step back. I'm a situational extrovert. And when I'm on stage and the light's shining on me and it's the Richard Cole variety show, or the Richard Cole, that hypnotist guy show, or Rick Cool, the comedy dude, it's on. I'm on. But because I like to play the bass and I like to do it, that's my hobby. So I'll step back. And the difference is, there's more similarities than differences. The similarities are, I'm still a nerd when it comes to stage setup. Like I make sure the cables are all out of my way so I'm not tripping on them. I have a spare battery for my guitar. I'll connect with the audience. I'll look at somebody when I'm playing a riff or something. I see too many bands where the guitarists are always, they got their heads down and they're just looking at their fingers. And I'm like, look up at the audience. They've left because you're in some guitar diarrhea riff, and they've and everybody's left. I remember there's a funny story. I'll take a side note. There's a funny story about this magician. And so he's doing a magic trick. And he says to somebody, he says, okay, this is at the magic club. And he said, okay, put the blindfold on me, put the blindfold on me. Okay. And now take the pack of cards and shuffle them and mix them up and choose a card and deal them into 5 piles or whatever. And now lay them all out and have a look. And is the top card your card? And the guy goes, wow, that was amazing. I have no idea how you did that. And he takes off the blindfold. So there's a whole group of magicians at the start, and quietly, one by one, as the blindfold was on the magician, everybody left the room. So he took his blindfold off. Everybody was gone. And he's like, what? And the person beside them, could have been me, went, wow, how'd you make them all disappear? That was great. That was cool. So, so it's like that. I guess that's we can log that up to, that's a note. Pay attention to each person in your audience and make sure you connect with them. Otherwise, they might just leave, especially if you turn your back on them. Ah.
Hey, tell me about your coaching that you're doing now. Tell me more about that.
So I'm at that time in my life where I know enough that I'd like to give back. And so I take on, once a year, I take on 6 to 8 coaching students, and at varying stages in their careers. I have some brand new people who are just looking to get in to the industry and where to start. I have some people who've been in the business for a while and are looking to take their career full time. And then I have a couple of retirees, but folks who are looking for their exit strategy. I teach them about an exit strategy, which is a fantastic thing. That it's funny, we were talking about maturing in the business, and I had a 20-year plan to do stage hypnosis, and then I had a exit strategy all lined up. I was still going to do entertainment. It was just going to be a little bit different. And so I had the whole plan, and it was coming up. I was like 18 years in or 19 years in or something like that. And I was at a dinner with Mike Mandel, Chris Thompson, and Jason Lynette. And Mike said to me, oh, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm just getting the exit strategy all lined up to retire. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I had a plan to retire out of the stage hypnosis business. And he's like, well, you can't. And I'm like, why can't I? And he says, because I'm retiring. And I mean, he's 148 years old. He's been doing it for 162 years in the hypnosis industry. So I guess I had to let him go first. So then that's I replanned on what to do. And so now part of it is doing the coaching, helping those people make this their business, make this their full-time business if they want. I know a lot of people, a lot of quality people in the industry that I can refer these people to, like, watch what these people are doing. I know where you should spend your money. I know where you should not spend your money. These are things that Paul, you and I getting into this right out of the gate, if we look back, I would have saved a bunch of money on certain things, and I would have spent more money on other things, because when you get in, that's what you have. You have mostly time and no money. And then later on down the road, you have mostly money and no time. I know some hypnotists who are, or who, it amazes me still how busy they are. And I wonder if it's busy or just busy looking, running around doing all kinds of things. And I always tell my students, I say, come up with a motto that will you'll use to represent your life. My motto is, I'd like to be fishing. It's in business. I'd like to be fishing, because that means I have everything in place to keep my business on autopilot. I am able to do what I want. It's like we said right at the start, I enjoy the freedom that I have. And so that's what the coaching is really all about, helping people get their careers started, get their careers jump started or boosted, or figuring out the exit strategy, what you're going to do next. What's next?
Super cool. All right, buddy. I think that's it. It's always nice to talk with you, buddy. I love you very much.
Thanks
I'm
very
glad.
much, Paul, for everything that you do for this industry. It's much needed, and this is your purpose.